The day I was diagnosed with cancer, everything stopped. It was just a regular Tuesday. I remember that clearly. I was sitting in the doctor's office, tapping my foot impatiently, waiting for results from what I thought was a routine checkup. The doctor came in, shut the door slowly, and sat across from me without saying a word. Then he said it. 3 words. Words that froze my blood. "You have cancer." I stared at him, my mind blank, my mouth dry. I didn't even hear the type at first. All I saw were his lips moving. All I heard was a loud ringing in my ears. The rest was a blur. When I finally came to, he was explaining treatments, tests, surgery options, survival rates. That last part hit me like a truck. I wasn't ready to think about rates and chances. I was 34. I had a full life, a career just taking off, a wife I thought I'd grow old with. My wife, Emma. I still remember calling her. My hands were trembling. She didn't pick up, so I texted, "Babe, can you call me when you get a sec? It's important." She texted back, "Still in meetings. Later tonight." I didn't want to break the news over a message, but I couldn't hold it in. "Emma, I have cancer." The typing dots appeared, then vanished, then nothing. That night, she came home late. I was sitting on the couch, still numb, when she walked in. She didn't hug me, didn't ask questions, just looked at me like I was a stranger. Her first words? "What kind of cancer?" Not, "Are you okay?" Not, "We'll get through this." Not even, "I'm so sorry." The next few weeks were even worse. She began to pull away, emotionally and physically. The house became quiet, cold. She stopped joining me at appointments, barely checked in. Once, when I had a particularly rough chemo session and threw up on the bathroom floor, she stood in the doorway with her arms crossed and said, "You should have aimed for the toilet." I knew something was dying, not just my body, but my marriage. Then one night, I found the messages. I was in bed, unable to sleep. She had left her phone on the charger. It buzzed. A name popped up I didn't recognize. Zach Briefcase. I shouldn't have looked, but I did. The texts were flirty, then explicit, then cruel. "He looks worse every day. I can't stand being in that house anymore. Zach, I wish I was waking up next to you right now instead. He's just a shell. This is what I signed up for." That one broke me. I didn't confront her right away. I let it simmer. I watched her lie to my face, day after day, until I couldn't take it anymore. One night, after another scan, I asked her directly, "Are you seeing someone else?" She didn't even deny it, just looked at me and said, "Do you blame me?" I wish I could say I yelled, threw something, but I didn't. I just sat there, feeling smaller than ever before. She packed her bags that weekend, and just like that, she was gone. Cut to 3 years later. By some miracle and a grueling treatment plan, I survived. I beat the odds, but the battle had changed me. I wasn't the same person anymore. I didn't just heal physically. I rebuilt myself. I found strength I didn't know I had. And I promised myself, I'll never let someone like that have power over me again. I had moved cities, changed careers, started speaking at cancer support groups. It helped, not just me, but others. Telling my story, helping people find hope became therapy. Until one night, after a talk I gave at a local event, a man came up to me, mid-40s, confident, polished, looked familiar, but I couldn't place him. He shook my hand and said, "Hey, I just wanted to say, great talk. I'm Dr. Zach Whitmore. I work at St. Agnes Oncology." Zach Briefcase. My stomach twisted. I kept a straight face, but my heart was racing. This was him, the man from the text, the man my wife left me for. He had no idea who I was, but I knew exactly who he was. And from that moment on, a plan began to form in my mind. A slow, methodical plan, not to hurt him, but to show them both that the man they discarded wasn't just alive, he was rising. After that handshake with Dr. Zach Whitmore, I couldn't sleep for days. He had no idea who I was, and that gave me power. Power I never had back then when I was lying in bed, bald, weak, while my wife kissed her doctor goodbye before heading home to pretend to be my partner. Now the tables had turned. I was healthy, stronger than I'd ever been, and most importantly, invisible to them. I could walk into their lives like a ghost. I started slow. First, I looked him up. Dr. Zach Whitmore, renowned oncologist, frequent guest speaker at medical conferences, one of the top names at St. Agnes Hospital. Married once, divorced, no kids. I found photos of him and Emma together. My Emma now is Emma. They weren't married, but from the photos on her public Instagram, they might as well have been. Fancy vacations, wine tastings, date night, red heart. One caption actually read, "Finally found peace, healed and loved." I almost laughed out loud. Peace? Love? After walking out on your husband in the middle of chemo? No, you don't get peace that easy. Not after what you did. I created a fake identity. Simple, believable. My name? Daniel Ward, a writer and cancer survivor working on a book titled Scars Don't Fade, Stories of Survival. I made a decent-looking website, stocked it with testimonials, some real, most invented, and sent out feelers to several hospitals about speaking engagements and interviews. St. Agnes was one of the first to reply. They invited me to speak at a monthly oncology awareness fundraiser, the same event Zach regularly attended. Perfect. The night of the fundraiser, I wore a charcoal suit, understated but sharp. I stepped on the stage and told my story, edited, of course. No mention of Emma, no mention of betrayal, just the sickness, the survival, and the strength that came after. I could see Zach in the crowd, nodding, even getting emotional during certain parts. After the speech, I made my move. I approached him casually. Dr. Whitmore, right? I just wanted to thank you for the work you do. My oncologist back in Chicago used to mention you. His eyes lit up. He loved recognition. Narcissists always do. That means a lot, he said. Your talk, it was powerful. Truly, if you ever want to collaborate, maybe do a co-panel at the next symposium. Let's stay in touch. I'd love that, I said. You can call me Daniel. Daniel, not my real name, just the name I chose to haunt him with. We exchanged emails, then phone numbers. Within weeks, I was a regular in his professional circle. I attended conferences, dinners, panels, always watching, always learning. He spoke openly about his goals, his ambitions, his projects. I even visited his clinic for research interviews. I met nurses, assistants, even patients. And eventually, I saw her again. Emma. She came in one afternoon during one of my book interviews. She looked older, sure, but still polished, poised, perfectly curated. Her eyes flicked across the waiting area and landed on me. At first, there was no recognition. Why would there be? I had changed, grown a beard, lost weight, wore different clothes, different posture. But then, I saw the hesitation in her eyes. Something clicked. She tilted her head slightly. Her smile faltered. I'm sorry, have we met? I smiled warmly. I don't think so. I'm Daniel. I'm writing a book on cancer survivors. She extended her hand, still unsure. Emma, of course you are, I thought. Nice to meet you, Emma, I said. You look familiar, though. Have you ever spoken at a survivor event? She shook her head slowly, eyes narrowing. No, not me. Zach came around the corner just then, placing a hand on her lower back. Hey, babe. Daniel, you two met already? We were just introducing ourselves, I said. I was telling her she looked familiar. Emma forced a smile, but I could tell she was unsettled. Good. Weeks passed. I played the long game. I became Zach's unofficial go-to for PR opportunities. I helped him pitch a podcast idea. I introduced him to a journalist friend who owed me a favor. I even ghost wrote an op-ed under his name, full of syrupy, emotional phrases about the sanctity of life and the bond between doctors and patients. Oh, the irony. And all the while, I was digging. Through overheard conversations and subtle prodding, I learned the cracks in their relationship. Zach worked too much. Emma felt neglected. She missed the passion they used to have. She wanted something more stable, less stressful. I even found out she had once cheated on him. 2, with a younger tech entrepreneur. They were a perfect storm of selfishness, really. 2 people who used others for comfort until the thrill wore off. I just had to give them a little nudge and watch it all implode. They say revenge is best served cold. But mine was methodical, the kind that simmered just below the surface, waiting to explode. Emma and Zach had no idea they were sitting on a time bomb. I just had to choose when to light the fuse. One Thursday evening, I was invited to a private dinner hosted by the hospital board. It was a networking event, mostly donors and doctors. I arrived early, nursing a glass of bourbon at the bar. When I saw them walking together, Zach with that self-important stride, hand on Emma's waist like a trophy he'd won, and Emma looking flawless, empty and bored. They didn't notice me at first, so I watched. Zach shook hands, made rounds, charmed the room. Emma floated beside him like a well-dressed shadow. Eventually, Zach caught my eye. "Daniel, didn't expect to see you here." "You know me," I said, smiling, always where the action is. "Emma," he said, turning to her. "You remember Daniel?" She hesitated, just a breath. "Of course," she lied smoothly. "Lovely to see you again." "You too," I said, holding her gaze just a second too long. "You looked stunning the other day, by the way. That navy dress? Wow." A flicker of unease crossed her face. Zach didn't notice. "We should all grab drinks sometime," I added. "Definitely," Zach said, clapping me on the shoulder. Emma said nothing. The game was on. Over the next few weeks, I subtly drove the wedge between them. Nothing too obvious, just little suggestions, hints, reminders of things they'd both rather forget. I emailed Zach anonymously from a burner account posing as a concerned colleague, warning him that Emma had been seen with a man in a cafe during one of Zach's on-call nights. She had, actually, it was her cousin, but Zach didn't know that. Then I sent Emma a tip from a fake Instagram account showing a photo of Zach getting a little too friendly with a young nurse at a gala. Completely innocent, but the angle was perfect. Neither of them confronted the other. Instead, the silence between them thickened. I watched it all from the sidelines. The real trigger came by accident. One evening, I stopped by Zach's office to drop off a draft for his upcoming book proposal, one I was ghostwriting for him. He wasn't in, but the door was slightly ajar. I knocked. No answer. I stepped inside, just to leave the file. Then I saw it. A printed photo, tucked beneath a pile of papers on his desk. It was Emma, at a beach. Not just any beach. Our beach. A private cove in San Diego we used to visit every year on our anniversary. I knew that rock formation in the background like the back of my hand. And then it hit me, she had taken him there. To my place. To our sacred spot. That wasn't coincidence. That was theft. That was mockery. I clenched the edge of his desk so hard my knuckles went white. That was the moment I realized I wasn't just going to hurt them. I was going to erase them. Phase 2, exposure. I created a fake profile on a medical gossip blog and started feeding them information. Harmless at first. Zach's flirtations, his arrogance, his inflated credentials on some conference bios. Then I got bolder. Through careful digging and some social engineering, I uncovered that Zach had altered a few patient satisfaction surveys, deleting negative comments from VIP clients to keep his stats clean. It wasn't illegal, but it was unethical. The blog published a story under the headline, "Golden Boy Doctor or Smoke and Mirrors?" It gained traction fast. Within days, local news picked it up. St. Agnes launched a quiet internal review. Zach was rattled. His confidence cracked. He canceled 2 interviews, pulled out of a podcast appearance, and even missed one of his beloved fundraisers. Emma, meanwhile, was spiraling too. I knew from her Instagram. Her posts became more vague, cryptic, loaded with melancholic quotes. And then came the opportunity one didn't even plan for. A bombshell email. One of the nurses at the hospital, who I casually befriended during interviews, messaged me anonymously. She had screenshots. Turns out, Emma had been flirting with a surgical resident. Harmless at first, then suggestive, then full-on explicit. The nurse didn't know who I really was. She just thought I was a good guy and felt Zach deserved to know. I smiled as I read the messages. This wasn't just karma. This was poetic justice. Emma had done it again, this time to the man she left me for. I packaged the screenshots, added a little commentary, and sent them from an untraceable account to Zach. Subject line: thought you should know. He received it on a Monday morning. By noon, he was gone from the hospital. The fallout was immediate. They fought, loudly, publicly. Emma tried to deny it. Zach wasn't hearing it. 3 days later, Emma moved out. I watched it all unfold from a distance. No interference. Just observation. Zach released a statement stepping back from media engagements for personal reasons. Emma deactivated her Instagram. The podcast was canceled. The book project? Buried. All those dreams they built on the ashes of my life? Gone. And the best part? They still had no idea it was me. I hadn't seen her in over 3 years. Not in person. Not face to face. But there she was, standing in the middle of the hospital hallway, staring at me like she had seen a ghost. Samantha. Time had done things to her. She wasn't the polished woman I remembered. Her hair was tired, her eyes dim. There was a nervous twitch in her fingers as she clutched her purse. She looked fragile. "Ryan?" she asked, voice trembling. I didn't answer right away. I was dressed in a clean white coat, clipboard in hand, walking out of a patient's room with Dr. Rios, her new partner, the one she'd left me for, the one who had unknowingly saved my life with a misfiled lab result that landed in my new doctor's hands. The same man she thought was her forever upgrade. He had no idea who I was. Not yet, but that was about to change. Let's rewind a little. After I finished treatment, after I rebuilt myself from the ashes of betrayal, I didn't just get healthy. I got smarter, stronger. I changed careers, went back to school, trained in patient advocacy and hospital administration. And fate or karma, or maybe something more poetic, had placed me in the very same hospital she now worked at. I never looked for her, but I always knew that if I ran into her, I wouldn't hide. I'd let her see what she left behind, what she thought was a dying man, had turned into someone better. "So you're working here?" she asked, glancing between me and Dr. Rios. Dr. Rios gave her a confused smile. "You two know each other?" I held his gaze. I didn't smirk. I didn't gloat. I simply said, "We used to be married." The color drained from her face. Silence. Long, heavy, suffocating. Dr. Rios blinked. "Wait, Ryan? This is that Ryan." Samantha looked down. "Yes." I could see it in his eyes. The flicker of realization. The uncomfortable shift. The crack in the illusion. He now knew that the man she abandoned during cancer was standing in front of him, alive, thriving, and not at all how she described me, I was sure. "Wow," he muttered. "She told me you didn't make it." I raised an eyebrow. That was new. Samantha's face turned ghostly pale. I didn't mean I thought he wouldn't. Wouldn't what? I asked. Live long enough to tell the truth? She stuttered, backing away slightly. "No, I didn't say it like that." But it didn't matter. The damage was already done. Not by me, by her. Dr. Rios cleared his throat and excused himself, clearly shaken, maybe questioning things. Maybe not, but the seeds of doubt were now planted and Samantha knew it. She reached out. "Ryan, can we talk?" I let a beat of silence pass. Then I said, quietly but clearly, "You talked enough when you left me for dead." I walked past her, left her standing there in the hallway, alone, as I headed into a meeting with the hospital director. But that wasn't the end. Not yet. A week later, our hospital was hosting a televised roundtable on patient care, ethics, and recovery stories. I was invited to speak as a survivor turned advocate. The event was streamed nationally. Guess who was sitting in the audience? Right next to Dr. Rios. Looking like she'd seen the end of the world. I walked on stage, told my story, how I was abandoned by my wife during cancer, how I found the strength to rebuild, how the darkest betrayal gave me the light to move forward. I never said her name. I didn't have to. She knew. Everyone who needed to know knew. Dr. Rios wouldn't even look at her. When I left the stage, the applause was thunderous, but all I could hear was the deafening silence of her guilt. And I smiled not out of spite, but because justice didn't always come with revenge. Sometimes it came with truth. And truth? That was the one thing she couldn't run from anymore. After the roundtable broadcast, my life changed. Again, only this time, it wasn't cancer. It was closure. People began reaching out. Former colleagues, strangers, patients who'd seen the clip and said my story gave them hope. I was invited to speak at conferences, featured in medical magazines, even offered a leadership role in the hospital's ethics board. But for Samantha, that night shattered something. Dr. Rios cornered me 2 days after the event. "Ryan," he said, awkward and tense, "I owe you an apology." I looked him in the eye. "For what?" He sighed. "For believing her version of you. For not knowing anything. I didn't even connect the dots until I saw the photos she tried to hide. The emails. The dates. She left you while you were getting biopsies. Then made it sound like you gave up on her." I didn't say anything. He continued. "She told me you didn't want treatment, that you were too weak, that she had to leave. She left because I was inconvenient." I finally replied. "She wanted a clean slate, one without tubes and tears and hospital bills." He looked away. "Are you still with her?" I asked. "I don't know," he muttered. "I don't know who she is anymore." I almost pitied him. Almost. But I walked away. I wasn't here for revenge. I'd already won. A month later, I got an anonymous envelope in my locker. Inside was a letter. From her. "Ryan." I watched the entire panel. Every second. I cried. Not because of what you said, but because of how wrong I was. You were strong. Brave. Everything I thought I wanted in someone else. You already were. I was just too blind to see it through the fear. You didn't deserve what I did to you. No one does. I was a coward, and I will carry that for the rest of my life. If you can forgive me someday, I hope you will. But if not, I understand. You survived, and I'm the one left behind. There was no return address. I folded it neatly and placed in my drawer, not to cherish, not to revisit, but to remind myself of who I'd become and who I would never be again. 6 months later, I stood on the same beach where she'd once told me she was too young to live like a widow. The wind was cool. My lungs were full. My life was mine again. A woman walked up beside me. Her name was Claire, a fellow advocate I'd met at a recovery retreat. Kind, honest, no games. She never asked about my past unless I offered it. She squeezed my hand. "You okay?" I nodded. "Yeah, I think I finally am." She smiled and leaned her head on my shoulder, not out of pity, not out of guilt, but because she saw me, the man I am, not the man someone else broke. As the sun dipped below the horizon, I realized something. Samantha hadn't just left me during cancer. She'd set me free, free to rebuild, free to heal, free to become the man who didn't just survive, but thrived. And while she might spend her life haunted by what she lost, I'd spend mine grateful, not for her betrayal, but for what it pushed me to discover, that the worst thing someone ever did to you might just lead you to the best version of yourself.